Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. A new eye-opening investigative report by MalaysiaKini's Kini News Lab has shed light on the substantial pensions awaiting elected representatives after their tenure. Now, the report highlights how some MPs are eligible for more than one pension due to holding different positions across their careers. I mean, this is both at the state level as aduns or excos, and at the federal level as an MP or a minister or deputy minister, even speaker and deputy speakers. So the question to us tonight is, should MPs be entitled to multiple pensions for the various roles that they've served? Now, joining us on the show are the people from Kini News Lab, Choon, who is the journalist who worked on the interactive series, and Aidila, Razak, the editor. Both of you, welcome to the show. I'm going to begin with Choon. To begin, what prompted Kini News Lab to investigate the pension entitlements of MPs and assembly persons?
We have this story idea when the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim said politicians holding multiple positions should morally responsible and offer only one pension. And then after that, DAP Secretary General Anthony Loke also say they should lead by example and welcome the call made by the Prime Minister. So we have the question, who is entitled to multiple pension and how much can they get? So we have the story there, and as a media, we try to search the information online, but we found that we can't find the open information. So we try to do it ourselves, and we also want to make it more transparency.
All right. So it's a wonderful piece of investigative journalism, also interactive representation of the data. Aidila, what were the kind of goals with this project? What was it that you wanted to highlight, to kind of illustrate to people?
I guess as Choon said, that one of the things that we really wanted was to make this information accessible to people, that they understand it and they know exactly how much people can get and how we calculate that. So that was the main goal. And secondly was to make it accessible in a way that I can compare and have context for this number. So if you just say 40,000 a month, what does that mean? So we need to contextualize it for the audience. What does it mean compared to a civil servant? What does it mean to compare to a teacher? How long would a teacher have to work to get the same amount of pension or less? So those were the goals that we had at the beginning of the project.
All right. But 40,000, the number that you quoted, for me came as quite a shock. In fact, I was so surprised to discover through your interactive report that some MPs get a higher monthly pension, or will get a higher monthly pension, than the Prime Minister himself. So can you explain how this happens, Choon?
Okay, this is because some politicians, they hold multiple positions in federal or state level. So for example, based on our finding, Shafiada, the former Chief Minister, Sabah Chief Minister, he can get entitled to around 40,000 pension a month. Okay, which is 18,000 as a former minister, federal minister, and 22,000 as a former chief minister and adun. But for Anwar, it's around 23,000 only because he never served as an adun or ESCO in the state level.
Right. So as I was playing around with this, so you can go into the report and build your own elected representative portfolio, or you can find out what your current elected representative might be getting in terms of a monthly pension at the end of his or her tenure. One of the things that also surprised me was the fact that state representatives' pensions tend to, or can be higher, in fact, than the federal level. I mean, you cited Shafi'i Abdul as Chief Minister of Sabah getting quite a high pension. Why is it that we've got states having more than at the federal level? Aidila.
I guess it really boils down to the different legislations. So each state has its own legislation and their legislature decides that number. So every state decides for themselves, and some states are, I guess, richer and more generous than others, and they set a higher number than the federal. So it really is about, unfortunately, people setting their own salaries and their pensions.
So state representatives are doing to next goes decide what their pensions should be and vote on legislation that decides what their pensions ought to be. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, simply put, yes, of course, they have committees for it. They have people who would work out the formula. But in the end of the day, they're the ones that are making up the laws. And that's the law that decides how much they make and how much pensions will get when they retire.
Right. Choon, in your findings, how common is it for MPs to draw multiple pensions, both at the kind of state level and then at the federal level?
Yeah, I think quite common. Quite common for the MP, they also draw the pension for the state level. Because I think for a lot of politicians, they start their career in the state level. So they become the Adun and state ESCO, even a Menteri Besar of Chief Minister. After that, they level up, go to the federal level, become MP and minister. And in some cases, actually for multiple pension, not only the federal and state level, they also, maybe some of them are was the civil servant. They also entitled to a pension, and some of them join the GLC, government. They also can entitled to the pension.
Right. And you mentioned, Aidila, at the start of our conversation that the idea is really to kind of draw comparison to how these pensions compare to someone, say, in the civil service. Talk to me about that, particularly when these elected representatives can start drawing their pensions and how long they'd have to work before they qualify.
So generally speaking, of course, the number is quite specific in the law, but generally speaking, the elected representatives have to serve a term. So that could be a certain specific number of years, depending on each legislature. But generally, they serve a term and then they get their pensions for a lifetime. If you compare that to the civil service, they have to work up to 30 years to get a certain number of pension. Of course, that's a maximum pension that they can get. If they want to get the minimum pension, they have to work 9 years, I think. Choon, can you correct me? For minimum pension?
Minimum pension for MP is 7.2 years.
So if we want to compare between the MP and a civil servant, the MP really just needs to serve one term. The exact number of years really depends on the legislature, but generally about 3 years. But for a member of the civil service, if they serve 3 years, they get nothing in pensions. So an MP needs to serve at least one term to get 4,000 ringgit in pensions. So that's for a lifetime. And then if they serve at least 9 years, that's about 3 terms, then they get the 9,600 in pensions. If you compare that to a civil servant who's serving for 30 years, that's the maximum pension. Like if you're talking about a teacher, he can get only 6,000 ringgit, so that's 60% of the last run salary. So in short, a member of the civil service has to work 30 years, we're talking about teacher here, to get less than how much an MP can get by serving just...
I mean, that's incredible. How do you see this issue, the issue that's highlighted in your interactive report? How does that intersect with some of the broader discussions that has been happening nationally around public sector pension reform in Malaysia? Aidila?
I think one of the things that triggered this whole discussion as well was the fact that the government was looking into changing civil service pension into an EPF contribution scheme. So people started talking about MP pensions as well. And then when you look at it even deeper, it's even more unfair or inequitable, I guess. But at the same time, some former MPs are saying that it is completely fair because they don't have security of tenure. So they have to risk a job every time to get re-elected. So they feel that they should have that kind of compensation versus a member of the civil service. So there are different perspectives to that, but I think generally for the general population, it does seem really quite unfair. Another way to look at it as well is to look at the allowances. So MPs can get a fixed allowance of about 25,000 a month. And then when you compare that to the median wage of the country, that's about 10 times more. So that's a huge difference. And if you compare the same ratio to Singapore, Singapore is less than 4 times. So the gap is huge. It's really about we have an inequitable class system that we in between the elected representatives and the people that they represent.
Right. Choon, I have to ask you, so in the couple of minutes we have left, why should taxpayers care about this? Why do we need to know what MPs receive as in terms of pension and how many pensions they receive? And particularly also the second part of your interactive series, as Aidila mentioned, the allowances and the perks that impact the overall compensation package for these MPs.
I think the politicians should lead by the example. Because a lot of people also complain about the minimum wage is very low, the median wage is very low. But when we compare it with the MP allowance, salary, and the pension, the gap is very big, at least compared to the Singapore. So the people will think that is it really deserved? Is it should you put more effort to increase the people's salary, their income?
Right. And since the report was live on the MalaysiaKini website, I have to ask, Parliament is now in session, so have you received any feedback from the public or from MPs about the report since its release?
Yeah, so we have a little poll at the end of our report, and we ask people to vote yes or no if they agree that MP pension should be changed to EPF, or if they agree that it should limit to only one pension. And it has been the highest voted among all our projects. So we had different types of polls, and this time we got more than 8,000 votes. So that's double or triple some previous projects. And people were overwhelming in agreement that MPs should not get multiple pensions, and I think 96% said that they would prefer for MPs to get APFs. And at the same time, our colleagues in Parliament have been polling the MPs. So they've been asking, out of 3 options, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer status quo? Or do you prefer only one type of pension or EPF? And that's a story that's coming up soon.
Oh, exciting. We're going to keep our eyes open for that one. Thank you both for coming on the show and explaining your report to us. It's been a pleasure. Choon and Aidila Razak from MalaysiaKini. Then we're going to take a quick break here on Consider This. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion on whether or not MPs should be entitled to multiple pensions for the various roles that they have served during their careers. Now, this is after a new investigative and interactive report by Kini News Lab, which highlights how some MPs can be eligible for more than one pension. Some pensions can be even as high as 40,000 ringgit a month. Joining us on the show now to discuss this further is Saddiq, Syed Abdul Rahman, who is the MP for Muar. YB Saddiq, thank you for being on the show with me today. I'm just wondering what your views are on MPs receiving multiple pensions for serving various roles. Talk to me about how you think through the ethical considerations of receiving multiple pensions for multiple positions served.
I'm of the opinion that it is morally wrong and reprehensible for MPs, ministers, prime ministers to take up multiple pensions. To actually take it further, I actually think it's wrong for elected reps to be entitled to even one pension, because we have to acknowledge that for civil servants, it will take them decades before they can finally be entitled to a very small pension. I mean, if you meet up with ex-servicemen, some of them get paid as low as 500 ringgit a month for their pension. And these are people who have served in the front lines, served the country. But yet, for a member of parliament or a minister, immediately the day where you set foot into parliament or in Putrajaya, you are immediately entitled for a pension. So I'm of the opinion that it is high time for us to reform the system in which we transition to an EPF scheme. And while I'm already an ex-minister and a 2-term serving MP, I also like to propose that this be done retrospectively, so it is applied to me as well, to be fair, not just to prospective MPs. Because I think it is an issue of what's morally right and wrong, and especially being brought up in a family filled with civil servants. I see my mom, needing to work for close to 4 decades before being entitled to her pension. While for me, the day where I set foot in Putrajaya and in Parliament, immediately I'm entitled to a 5-digit pension, which I believe is wrong.
Okay, so but with your first-hand experience of knowing what is required of an MP, what is required of a minister, talk to me about the workload, the responsibilities, the risks that come with, the lack of job security, if I might say, for an MP. I mean, not that everyone has job security in their roles, but when we think about what an MP does, an elected representative does the pension, would a pension reflect those workloads and responsibilities?
The best and brightest of Malaysians will never have a job security issue if they're out of Parliament. I want to make it very clear that in order for us to build Malaysia to become a developed country, we need to get the brightest and smartest people into Parliament. And whether they are elected or not, and post-election, if they are voted out after 1 or 2 terms, I'm fairly certain if you are good, you're bright, you're capable, you're credible, you will be. You will never have a problem of job security. Just look at how our former Minister of Health, Khairi Jamaluddin and Shardul Hamdan, I think have strategically positioned themselves despite not winning elections, and I personally believe that they are better off today. The point of the matter is, those who suffer from job security are those who should not even be elected to begin with, right? I mean, we need to get the smartest and brightest into Parliament, that's first. Secondarily, we should not treat the post of an MP or ministership as one which is based on reward, and a lifetime reward. That immediately once you get elected, you are entitled to a pension, multiple pensions. Today, Melisa, if I can share, I mean, if you look at the post of the Menteri Besar of Selangor, right? I mean, if you are the Menteri Besar, every month you get close to 200,000 ringgit. 200,000. I mean, that's no joke. Because you have a combination of the Menteri Besar salary, the MP salary, the ADUN salary, and then you have multiple boards, state GLCs, which pay tens of thousands, not 1, 2, multiple. And that adds up to close to 200,000 ringgit. I mean, and when you are retired, you are set for life. And the problem which that creates is a moral hazard where in the end, people who are old and powerful will always want to cling on to power, because they know that power reaps dividends in terms of multiple pensions, hundreds of thousands of ringgit of payoffs, not just in terms of salaries, but also in terms of GLC positions, state GLCs, agencies, and many others. And that is why we need to transition out of this old corrupt divisive system to one which is based on talent, merit, so that we get the smartest and brightest to join politics.
Okay, so just on that note, there are critics who say, well, actually, if you remove pensions or restrict pensions, that could deter some of those brightest and most talented individuals from wanting to join politics in the first place. What would you say to those who think that pensions are crucial in attracting high caliber talent into politics?
I mean, if you look at countries across the world, many of them have transitioned out of the pension system, especially when it comes to politics. I mean, Singapore in the 1990s, early 2000s, transitioned their politicians out of a pension system to one which is based on CPF. However, they pay their politicians remarkably well, but that's in terms of their monthly salary. But above and beyond that, it is also important to acknowledge that you are expected to also have a daily job as well. It's not like you are reliant on this forever, and this will be you will be reliant on this political post until you are old. No. In reality, a good system will incentivize MPs to always upskill, reskill, so that even when they are out of Parliament, they will still be credible, competent enough to get a proper job. I think it's telling when MPs, when they get elected out, they cannot survive, they do not get any job. It shows of the lack of talents which we have, especially in terms of politics.
Just to pull on this thread a little further, how do you think we should attract the best talent into politics? I mean, how much should money factor into it? As when you think about the pull factor of a job in politics, a high-paying job in politics, how should we be thinking about bringing the best talent into the world of politics?
Okay, just 3 quick points. Number one, I'm not against a decent salary for MPs, adons, and ministers. I think there's a big difference between a salary and multiple pensions. That's the first point to make. Second point to make here as well is that we also need to be highly transparent in how the salary scheme is viewed. Because I remember, I mean, even when I was a minister, many people didn't know that as a minister, every month you get about 55,000 to 60,000 ringgit. And that's not inclusive of the many other perks in terms of first class flight tickets, holidays, even allowance pinggan mangkuk. I mean, for pinggan mangkuk you get about 50,000 ringgit, and many others. So because when people look at the salary, people just look at the base salary without actually considering everything else. So I think transparency will lead to greater scrutiny, and greater scrutiny will lead to a proper benchmark. So I think in the end, I do acknowledge that there is a need for a dignified salary, especially to attract the smartest and brightest, but it should not be hidden. It should be up for debate. And at the same time, I think especially when you are using taxpayers' money, you must do it in a highly transparent fashion. However, that must be differentiated from pensions. I've said from the beginning, remove pensions, move politicians like myself to an EPF scheme. The final point to also make here is that I mean, it will be a lie if I were to say that money does not matter at all. But we need to create a system where money is not everything. Problem today is that it's not just, I mean, you can be an MP, you can be an adon, you will be a minister. Above and beyond that, you will be appointed into multiple GLCs, state GLCs, agencies. As I shared, I mean, there are people who earn 200,000 ringgit a month. So I think it's also about reframing politics as something which is of national service. But while it is of national service, it must also be backed up with a dignified, transparent salary, so that it becomes very clear. And while these are the 3 points, I want to package it this way. I think there's a big difference between an individual salary and proper allocation for your constituency. And this is where a bigger problem lies, because you cannot expect for MPs and adons to spend 2/3 of their salary to service their constituents when they are in opposition, because they get discriminated, because the government will never want to give them the parliamentary allocations as they should. And that's where the problem lies. I mean, I know of opposition MPs and adons, I mean, who spend 2/3 of their salaries to actually open up their office, to hire officers, and that's quite unjust and unfair, while a government MP or adon will get millions to spend on their constituents. So I think once you frame it that way, so it's a proper dignified salary without having a pension, and at the same time allowing you to also have or finance your private life without compromising your duty to your constituents and to the public.
So how do we move forward from this? Because it is the lawmakers themselves who decide what salaries, what pensions, what conditions they get. So how do we reform this system, YB?
I mean, to be very honest, I've personally tabled a private member's bill, I think it was in the last parliament sitting, to remove pensions, including upon myself, and transition to an EPF scheme, because I thought it was unjust and unfair when the government decided to remove pensions for civil servants or new entry civil servants, but at the same time to keep the pension scheme for politicians. However, it never saw the light of day. And I believe that's telling that the current batch of political elites are unwilling to change or to progress. However, it may not work today, it may not even work tomorrow, next week, or next month, but I have faith one day or another it will see the light of day, because I believe that the public is ready to hold politicians accountable, to ensure that in the end, we get the smartest and brightest of people to be in politics. And those who are smartest and brightest often who join politics do this out of national service, and finding that right balance, national service, and also to ensure that they can finance their personal lives and family. I think that balance can be struck. However, the current system evidently favors one over the other.
Right. That was MP for Muar, Saddiq, Syed Abdul Rahman, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.